Having introduced you to what you study in public administration, I now move on to the father of public administration, Woodrow Wilson. I'm not trying to say he founded the subject. There were many scholars and writers, practitioners of administration before him. In fact, Kautilya built an administrative system, many elements of which endure even today for an entire subcontinent like India. Kautilya, way back 320 BC. In the Mahabharata, we speak of Shanti Parva. The Mahabharata, the Ramayana, the Gita contain many precepts of administration. In the West, great scholars like Socrates, Aristotle, Aquinas, Machiavelli, all these people have written about administration. But the reason why we regard Wilson the father of public administration is he propounded certain points of view which became the pathway to the development of public administration. He laid the foundations for the development of public administration. Laid the foundations. When he wrote, he saw political corruption, nepotism, political interference in administration. This naturally disturbed him. There was also a movement called the progressive movement to remove the evils present in public administration. There was what was called the spoils system. President Andrew Jackson legitimized it. To the winners go the spoils was the theory. Politicians nominated their own cronies to important posts in administration. Not that it is absent today. In Karnataka we see it in full swing now. Therefore, in order to meet the problem of the times, Wilson suggested a political science public administration dichotomy. That is, this is a democracy, he said, referring to America. The will of the people is supreme, and the representatives have the right to determine policies. Framing policy is the business of politicians, politics. But having done that, they should leave the execution of the policy to administrators who are recruited and trained for the purpose. The problems of political science are different from the problems of administration. Just as administrators cannot directly interfere in policy making, politicians should not interfere in the day-to-day business of administration, getting their own men posted to the areas they want, interfering with actual working, tying the hands of administrators. No. You do your work, let them do their work. Politicians determine policies. administrators carry them out. This is the famous Wilsonian dichotomy. Everywhere in principle it is accepted. In practice, of course, there are deviations. But to say, as Wilson said, that the task of the administration is the systematic application of the law leads to some confusion. Administrators are not robots to merely implement the law. While implementing, take for instance prohibition, bootlegging, deaths due to bootlegging, they encounter problems, but let me tell you, nowhere did Wilson say administrators should not give advice. But then, a bit of warning by Waldo was necessary. Officials must advise ministers on what the problems are. They are paid to do it. So, but then, bureaucracy is only an instrument. Critical theory, a modern theory, points out this instrument has become an institution. Anyone who has read the skit played in 3 parts, Yes Minister, will agree how the minister goes on nodding his head, the administrator goes on nodding his head to what the Prime Minister says, but does his own thing. This is what you meant, Minister, he said. And the minister being a novice, yeah. Like a drowning man catching hold of a straw. Yeah, that's exactly what I meant. That may not be what he had meant. So, bureaucracy has a tendency to aggrandize itself. Yeah. It leads to bureaucratization. Again, critical theory says bureaucratization legitimizes crisis. If there is a crisis of inequality, well, that is required for development. Development for whom? For what? Efficiency for whom? Efficiency for what? So you can think along these lines. Again, Wilson emphasized that like the private sector, government should run like business. It should be business-like, not merely postponing things. But it is not business. It is not profit-oriented. It deals with the great issues of the day. Also, now, once again, let me repeat. Politicians are acquainted with the problems of the people and frame policies accordingly. Bureaucracy is trained to implement those policies. Nowhere is it said that the bureaucrat should not advise. Yeah. Bureaucracy must become more and more competent. Public administration should become scientific. No, not experimental science, though certain experiments are possible even in public administration. In a small area, you can experiment with a policy. But then, it is possible to base policies on facts. It is possible to systematically and scientifically study this subject. Wilson also wanted learning from other constitutions. A criticism is made that Indian constitution is a bag of borrowings. Is it really so? We borrowed from various countries, but we have produced a magnificent constitution which has survived for 7 decades. Well, constitutions have disappeared in Southeast Asia. It is not the fault of the constitution if something has gone wrong. It is the fault with human beings. Yeah. So you have understood some idea of Wilson. He gave rise to the study of comparative politics, comparative study of institutions. You cannot transplant. He admired Prussia. He admired Napoleon. But you can't adopt Napoleonic methods, Bavarian methods in a democracy. Institutions cannot be drafted from one country to another. This gave rise to the ecological study of administration. I think you have got some idea of Wilson. In my next lesson, I shall continue the subject.